The mid-morning sun beat down relentlessly on the dusty main street of Redemption Gulch, a typical frontier town where the only constants were the wind and the relentless pursuit of opportunity. Elias Thorne, a man whose rugged face bore the marks of countless seasons on his isolated ranch, rode into town with a single purpose: to resupply. He dismounted his weary horse near the general store, the familiar scent of dry earth and pine mingling with the less pleasant aroma of the livestock penned nearby. His usual stoicism was a shield, a way to navigate the often brash personalities of town life, a stark contrast to the quiet solitude he cherished on his sprawling property miles out. He ambled towards the commotion, drawn by the unusual hubbub near the station's loading dock. A small crowd had gathered, their murmurs growing louder, more agitated. Elias pushed through, his brow furrowing as he saw the cause: an impromptu auction. But this wasn't for horses or tools. It was for a human being. A young woman, no older than her mid-20s, stood on a makeshift platform, her hands tied behind her back, her mouth crudely taped shut. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and defiance, scanned the faces of the bidders, pleading silently. A burly, unkempt man, the auctioneer, barked out a starting price, his voice laced with an unsettling relish. A cold knot formed in Elias's stomach. He'd seen plenty of rough things in the West, but this felt different, a fundamental violation of decency. He watched as a few men placed half-hearted bids, their expressions ranging from morbid curiosity to something darker. The bidding faltered, and a sense of desperate urgency seized Elias. He wasn't a hero, just a man who believed in a basic right to freedom. Before he could fully process the impulsive thought, he heard his own voice, surprisingly clear and strong, call out a bid that instantly silenced the murmuring crowd and stunned the auctioneer. He had bought her. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the creak of the wagon wheels nearby. Elias, his heart thumping in his chest, stepped forward. The auctioneer, bewildered but quickly recovering, gestured curtly for the woman, Sarah, to be handed over. As the ropes were untied and the tape carefully peeled from her lips by Elias, her gaze met his, a complex mix of terror and bewildered hope. Her first word, barely a whisper, was free. It was a word that echoed in the dusty air, a promise whispered between them, a fragile beginning to an unthinkable journey. As they began the long ride back to his ranch, the vast open plains stretching before them, the weight of their unconventional start hung heavy in the air, a silence filled with unspoken questions and uncertain possibilities. The ride to Elias's ranch was long and mostly silent, punctuated only by the rhythmic creak of the saddle leather and the distant cries of hawks. Sarah sat rigid in the wagon beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon, her silence more a testament to exhaustion and shock than defiance. Elias, for his part, found himself uncharacteristically flustered. He was a man of the land, comfortable with the predictable cycles of nature and the demands of ranching, but entirely out of his depth with this unexpected human cargo. His ranch, a cluster of sturdy log buildings nestled against a rugged mesa, was a sanctuary he rarely shared, and the thought of another person, especially one so traumatized, living within its quiet confines was daunting. Upon their arrival, Elias led her to a small spare room off the main cabin, indicating a wash basin and fresh clothes with a simple gesture. He left her to her privacy, retreating to the solitude of his porch to gather his thoughts. The enormity of his impulsive act began to settle in. He hadn't thought beyond the moment of her liberation, and now the reality of integrating her into his solitary life pressed in. He knew little about her, save for the desperation in her eyes and the single, potent word she had spoken. He hoped, perhaps foolishly, that kindness and space would be enough to begin to heal whatever wounds she carried. Later, over a simple meal of stew and fresh bread, the first hesitant words were exchanged, not of accusation or demand, but of genuine inquiry. Elias, in his gruff but gentle way, asked her name and where she was from. Sarah, still guarded, revealed snippets of her past. A small family farm lost to debt, a treacherous journey west with false promises, and then the unthinkable entrapment by unscrupulous opportunists who saw her vulnerability as a chance for profit. She hadn't been kidnapped by force, but rather manipulated and coerced, tricked into a situation where she was deemed a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. The shame of it was still raw, but in Elias's unwavering gaze, she found a flicker of understanding, not judgment. The days that followed established a fragile truce. Elias, unaccustomed to sharing his space, made an effort to ensure Sarah felt safe and provided for. He showed her the well, the small vegetable patch, and the basic layout of the ranch. He didn't pry, but he was observant, noticing her quiet efficiency as she began to help with small chores, her hands, though softer than his, showing a surprising aptitude for domestic tasks. The silence between them began to lose its tension, slowly filling with a quiet understanding. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was the foundation of something far more profound. A shared space, built on an act of unexpected compassion, in a world that offered little of either. Word of Elias Thorne's unconventional return from Redemption Gulch spread like wildfire through the sparsely populated settlements. The story, distorted and embellished with each retelling, painted a picture of a reclusive rancher buying a mysterious woman at an auction. When Elias and Sarah made their next trip to the nearest town for supplies, the whispers were almost audible. Heads turned, eyes followed them, and conversations abruptly ceased as they passed. Sarah felt the weight of every gaze, the judgment in every averted glance. It was a stark reminder that despite Elias's act of kindness, her past, or at least the perception of it, would follow her. The most cutting encounter occurred at the general store. A trio of women, known for their sharp tongues and even sharper judgments, stood by the counter, their eyes raking over Sarah from head to toe. One of them, a stout woman named Martha, cleared her throat loudly. "Heard tell you acquired yourself a new helper, Elias," she said, her voice dripping with insinuation. "Seems mighty peculiar, bringing a woman home from an auction block. Folks around here like to know who their neighbors are and where they come from." Sarah felt a flush creep up her neck, her hands clenching at her sides. She braced herself for Elias to dismiss her, to confirm their suspicions. But Elias, usually so reticent, surprised both Sarah and the women. He simply turned, his gaze steady and unwavering as he met Martha's accusatory stare. "She's Sarah," he stated, his voice low but firm, "and she's here. That's all anyone needs to know." He then turned his back on them, placing his order with the store owner, effectively shutting down the conversation. Sarah looked at him, a tremor of gratitude running through her. In that moment, she realized he wasn't just offering her a roof over her head. He was offering her his quiet protection, a shield against a world that was quick to judge. Back at the ranch, the external pressures subtly strengthened their nascent bond. They faced practical challenges too, not just the social ones. A late-season blizzard swept down from the mountains, trapping them on the ranch for days, threatening the livestock. Elias worked tirelessly to protect the herd, but a misstep on an icy patch left him with a badly twisted ankle. Sarah, despite her limited experience with ranch life, stepped up. She learned quickly, tending to the injured animals, fetching water, and maintaining the fire. Her resilience surprising even Elias. In the close confines of the cabin, nursing his injury, Elias saw a strength in Sarah he hadn't fully appreciated, a quiet competence that went beyond simple chores. They were becoming a unit, forged not by choice, but by necessity and a growing, unspoken understanding. As the last vestiges of winter melted into the nascent warmth of spring, a tangible shift occurred on the ranch. The harshness of the season had tested them, and they had, against all odds, emerged stronger. Sarah, no longer simply an inhabitant, had seamlessly integrated herself into the rhythm of ranch life. Her initial wariness had given way to a quiet confidence, and she moved with purpose, her movements fluid and efficient as she assisted with daily tasks. She discovered a particular knack for the small, neglected garden plot near the cabin, coaxing reluctant seeds into vibrant green shoots, a splash of unexpected colour against the rugged landscape. Elias, watching her from the porch during a rare moment of rest, found himself noticing more than just her efficiency. He saw the way her brow furrowed in concentration as she weeded, the gentle way she spoke to the horses, the quiet joy that lit her eyes when a new sprout emerged from the earth. He realized he hadn't merely provided her sanctuary, she was bringing life and a subtle warmth back to his long, empty home. The long silences between them, once awkward, now held a comfortable intimacy, punctuated by shared observations about the weather, the livestock, or the progress of her small garden. Their conversations began to deepen, moving beyond the practicalities of ranch life. Over mugs of coffee in the quiet evenings, by the flickering light of the kerosene lamp, they started to share fragments of their pasts, not just the harsh realities, but also forgotten dreams and small, cherished memories. Sarah spoke of the wildflowers that grew near her childhood home, and Elias recounted tales of guiding cattle across vast stretches of land, his voice softening with nostalgia. These were small, tentative steps into each other's inner worlds, revealing the layers beneath their hardened exteriors. An unspoken affection began to blossom between them, subtle as the first spring buds. It manifested in small gestures, Elias leaving a particularly fragrant wildflower on Sarah's windowsill, Sarah ensuring his coffee was always hot when he came in from the cold. A shared smile over a clumsy calf, a lingering glance across the dinner table. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic confession. Instead, it was a quiet, almost imperceptible shift, a gradual realization that the lonely rancher and the woman he bought were becoming something far more profound to each other. The vastness of the frontier no longer felt so isolating, for they were no longer truly alone. The burgeoning peace on Elias's ranch was shattered by a stark reminder of Sarah's past. A summons arrived via a traveling circuit judge, an official notice demanding Sarah's appearance in court. The unscrupulous individuals who had orchestrated her auction had heard rumors of her continued presence with Elias, and seeing an opportunity for further exploitation, were now attempting to claim her, arguing that the original transaction was invalid, or that additional payments were due. A cloud of apprehension settled over the ranch, threatening to extinguish the fragile hope that had taken root. The day of the hearing was tense. The small courthouse in the county seat was packed, drawn by the unusual nature of the case. Sarah, though outwardly composed, felt a tremor of fear. She stood beside Elias, who, despite his quiet demeanor, radiated an unwavering resolve. The manipulative men who had orchestrated her sale presented their case, painting Sarah as a runaway and Elias as an accomplice. The judge, a stern but fair man, listened intently, his gaze moving between the plaintiff and the unlikely pair standing before him. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, a hush fell over the room. She began, her voice initially soft, but gaining strength with each word, recounting the desperation that had led her to that station, the deceit, and the profound dehumanization she had experienced. She spoke of Elias's unexpected act of kindness, and how he had treated her with respect and dignity, never as property. Her testimony was raw, honest, and powerful, cutting through the flimsy legal arguments of her adversaries. She ended with a heartfelt plea for her inherent right to choose her own path, her own life, her own freedom. The judge, clearly moved, delivered his verdict. He dismissed the case, admonishing the plaintiffs and affirming Sarah's undeniable right to her freedom. A wave of quiet relief swept through the courtroom. In the aftermath, outside the courthouse, Elias turned to Sarah. There were no grand words, no flowery speeches. He simply looked at her, his eyes conveying a depth of emotion she had only begun to understand. "You're free, Sarah," he said, his voice husky. "Truly free. You can go anywhere, do anything. But if you choose to stay, it would be as my partner, my equal." Sarah, tears brimming in her eyes, didn't hesitate. She looked at him, not just with gratitude, but with a profound love that had grown silently between them. "I choose to stay," she whispered, her voice firm. Their marriage was a quiet affair, a handshake and a shared glance, a bond forged not by law or custom, but by shared adversity, mutual respect, and the promise of a future built on genuine partnership. The final scenes show them side by side, working the land, their faces turned towards the endless horizon. Two souls, once lost and solitary, now bound by an unbreakable thread of freedom and love in the vast, untamed American West.